What would you do if you were alone in the Montana wilderness at midnight, carrying a blind German Shepherd puppy who couldn't see the pack of 20 wolves surrounding you, waiting for the perfect moment to attack? That's exactly the nightmare Navy SEAL veteran Axel Thompson faced when a routine mountain rescue turned into the most primal battle for survival of his life. But what Axel didn't know was that the blind puppy he was trying to save wasn't helpless at all. She was the key to unlocking an ancient bond between wolves and dogs that had been forgotten for thousands of years, and her blindness was about to become the supernatural ability that would either save both their lives or lead them deeper into a darkness from which no one had ever returned. This is the true story of a midnight howl that awakened something ancient, a blind puppy whose other senses defied nature, and the moment when, "Trust me, we're packed now," became the words that would either forge an impossible alliance or mark their final moments alive. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments, and if you believe that some bonds transcend species and sight, hit that like button. You're going to need every bit of faith you have for this one. Now, let's begin. The emergency call came at 11:47 p.m. on a moonless October night, pulling Axel Thompson from deep sleep at his Montana cabin where the Midnight Brotherhood, Scout, Ranger, Angel, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo, were resting after a grueling week of search and rescue operations. "Axel, this is Dr. Rebecca Chen at the Wilderness Veterinary Clinic." The voice was tight with urgency. "I need you to get to Glacier Point immediately. We have a situation that defies explanation." Axel was immediately alert, his thick, dark beard still bearing the creases of sleep, but his weathered military features hardening into the focus that had served him through countless emergencies. "What's the nature of the emergency, Chen?" 3 hours ago, we received a severely injured German Shepherd female who had been hit by a vehicle on Highway 2. She died during surgery, but not before giving birth to a single puppy. The puppy is... Axel, she's completely blind, but she's exhibiting behaviors I've never seen in my 15 years of veterinary medicine. The Midnight Brotherhood sensed the gravity in Axel's voice and began moving into their alert positions, but something was different about this call. Scout, Ranger, and Angel were showing the restless behavior that meant they detected something beyond normal emergency response requirements. "Dr. Chen, what kind of behaviors?" "The puppy is 6 weeks old and has been blind since birth, but she's responding to sounds, scents, and environmental changes with precision that exceeds adult dogs with full vision. More importantly, Axel, she's been making vocalizations they're not normal dog sounds." Dr. Chen's voice carried the confusion of a medical professional witnessing something that challenged her understanding of animal behavior. "The sounds she's making are identical to wolf communication patterns. And 30 minutes ago, we started hearing responses from the wilderness around the clinic." Axel felt his blood run cold. "What kind of responses?" "Wolf howls, Axel. At least 15 to 20 individual voices all responding to this blind puppy's calls. They're not hunting calls or territorial warnings. They're pack communication sounds." The situation was unprecedented. Domestic dogs had evolved away from wolf pack behavior over thousands of years, and a 6-week-old blind puppy shouldn't be capable of any form of wild canine communication, let alone sounds that would attract actual wolf responses. "Dr. Chen, where is the puppy now?" "That's why I'm calling you. 20 minutes ago, the wolf pack started moving closer to the clinic. Our security cameras show at least 20 wolves positioned in the forest around our building. They're not attacking, but they're not leaving either. It's like they're waiting for something." Axel looked at Scout, Ranger, Angel, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo, who were all showing unusual alertness combined with what appeared to be anticipation rather than concern. "Dr. Chen, I'm 40 minutes out from your location. Can you keep the puppy secure until I arrive?" "Axel, there's something else. The puppy has been making distressed sounds for the past hour, and every time she vocalizes, the wolves move closer. I think they're trying to communicate with her, and I think she's calling for help." The drive through the Montana mountain roads to the Wilderness Veterinary Clinic took 37 minutes, but it was the most strategically complex 37 minutes of Axel's recent career. This wasn't just an animal rescue. This was a situation that involved wild predators, unusual animal behavior, and a blind puppy who somehow possessed abilities that shouldn't exist. When Axel arrived at the clinic, he found Dr. Chen waiting with an expression that combined professional confusion with genuine fear. "She's in the back examination room," Dr. Chen said, leading Axel through the facility. "But Axel, the wolves have completely surrounded the building. They're maintaining distance, but they haven't moved away despite our security lighting and alarm systems." In the examination room, Axel encountered something that would change his understanding of the bond between domestic dogs and their wild ancestors. A German Shepherd puppy, 6 weeks old, completely blind with clouded eyes that showed no light recognition, sitting in perfect alertness while making soft, complex sounds that were unlike anything Axel had heard from domestic dogs. But it was when the puppy heard Axel's voice that everything changed. The small dog immediately oriented toward him with precision that defied her blindness, made a sound that was clearly a greeting, and then vocalized in a pattern that was immediately answered by multiple wolf calls from the forest outside. "Jesus Christ," Axel whispered. "She's communicating with them." "That's not the strangest part," Dr. Chen said. "Watch this." Dr. Chen moved toward the examination room door, and the blind puppy immediately made a sharp warning sound. Instantly, the wolf howls outside became more urgent and closer. "She's coordinating with them," Axel realized. "This puppy is somehow functioning as a communication link between the clinic and a wolf pack." But it was what happened next that transformed the situation from unusual to dangerous. The power went out. In the sudden darkness of the rural veterinary clinic, 20 wolves began moving closer to the building while a blind German Shepherd puppy made sounds that clearly meant time to go. "Dr. Chen," Axel said in the darkness, "I think the wolves aren't trying to rescue this puppy. I think they're trying to recruit her. And I think we just lost our defensive advantage." The blind puppy made one final vocalization, a sound that was answered by howls so close they seemed to be coming from directly outside the examination room windows. Then the scratching at the doors began. In the pitch-black darkness of the veterinary clinic, with 20 wolves scratching at the doors and windows, Axel Thompson made a decision that would either save 3 lives or lead them all into the Montana wilderness to die. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly while gently lifting the blind German Shepherd puppy, "we're not staying here to become trapped prey. We're going outside to meet them." "Axel, that's suicide," Dr. Chen whispered. "Those are wild wolves. They'll kill us the moment we step outside." But the blind puppy in Axel's arms made a soft sound that was immediately answered by 20 voices from the darkness. Not aggressive hunting calls, but what sounded like welcoming pack vocalizations. "Dr. Chen, this puppy has been communicating with them for hours. She's not afraid of them. Maybe we shouldn't be either." What happened when Axel stepped outside the clinic would challenge everything experts thought they knew about wolf behavior, domestic dog genetics, and the ancient bonds that connected both species. The moment Axel emerged into the moonless Montana night carrying the blind puppy, 20 pairs of amber eyes reflected his tactical flashlight beam. The wolves had formed a perfect circle around the clinic, but instead of attacking position, they were in what appeared to be a protective formation. The largest wolf, a massive male that easily weighed 140 pounds, approached to within 10 feet of Axel and made a sound that the blind puppy immediately responded to with complex vocalizations. "They're having a conversation," Axel realized. "She's not just making random sounds, she's actually communicating with their alpha." Dr. Chen, who had followed Axel outside against every instinct of self-preservation, watched in amazement as the blind puppy continued what could only be described as a diplomatic negotiation with the wolf pack. "This is impossible," Dr. Chen whispered. "Domestic dogs lost the ability to communicate with wolves thousands of years ago, and a 6-week-old blind puppy shouldn't be capable of any complex communication." But it was what the puppy did next that revealed the true nature of her extraordinary abilities. Still blind, still only 6 weeks old, she somehow guided Axel toward the wolf pack using subtle body language and soft directional sounds. Not toward danger, but toward what appeared to be an invitation. The alpha wolf made a sound that was clearly a command, and the entire pack began moving in formation through the Montana forest, not hunting, not fleeing, but traveling with purpose toward an unknown destination. And the blind puppy made sounds that meant follow them. Axel, Dr. Chen said as they began following 20 wolves deeper into wilderness, I think this puppy isn't just communicating with them, I think she's part of their pack structure. Over the next 2 hours, as they traveled through terrain that should have been impossible to navigate in darkness, Axel discovered that the blind puppy possessed abilities that defied every understanding of canine development. Despite her complete lack of vision, she could predict changes in terrain, detect dangerous wildlife from distances that exceeded adult dogs with full senses, and coordinate complex movements with the wolf pack using vocalizations that grew more sophisticated with each mile they traveled. Her other senses aren't just compensating for her blindness, Axel realized while watching the puppy guide him safely around a hidden ravine. They're operating at levels that exceed normal canine capabilities. But it was when they reached the wolves' destination that Axel understood the true purpose of this midnight journey. In a remote valley 30 miles from the veterinary clinic, the wolf pack led them to an ancient den site that contained something that would change everything about canine genetics and evolutionary biology. 7 wolf pups, approximately the same age as the blind German Shepherd puppy, but showing unmistakable signs of domestic dog characteristics, shorter snouts, different ear shapes, coat patterns that suggested crossbreeding that shouldn't have been possible. Dr. Chen, Axel said, studying the hybrid pups, I think we're looking at the offspring of wolves and domestic dogs, and I think our blind puppy is somehow related to them. The alpha wolf approached the blind German Shepherd puppy and began making gentle sounds while the 7 hybrid pups emerged from the den to investigate their visitor. What followed was a reunion that revealed genetic connections spanning thousands of years. The blind puppy and the hybrid wolf pups began communicating with vocalizations that were clearly recognition sounds. Despite being different species, despite the German Shepherd's complete blindness, despite having never met before, they were interacting like littermates who had been separated and finally reunited. This is more than genetics, Dr. Chen whispered, watching the impossible interaction. This is like they share some kind of genetic memory that connects them across species lines. But it was the alpha wolf who provided the most stunning revelation. The massive male began making sounds that were clearly directed at Axel, not threats or warnings, but what appeared to be communication attempts designed to convey information. And somehow, the blind puppy began translating. Using body language, vocalizations, and positioning that Axel found himself understanding, despite having no training in wolf communication, the puppy seemed to be facilitating a conversation between Axel and the alpha wolf. He's trying to tell us something, Axel realized, and she's helping him communicate it. What the alpha wolf was attempting to convey would explain why a blind German Shepherd puppy possessed supernatural abilities, why wolves would risk approaching human settlements, and why this ancient valley contained hybrid offspring that shouldn't exist. The blind puppy made one final series of complex vocalizations, which the alpha wolf answered with what sounded like agreement. Then, using the same guidance techniques she had used to lead them safely through the wilderness, the puppy began directing Axel towards something hidden deeper in the valley, something that the wolf pack had been guarding for longer than human settlements had existed in Montana. Dr. Chen, Axel said as they followed the blind puppy toward whatever the wolves were protecting, I think we're about to discover why this puppy was born blind but with abilities that exceed normal dogs, and I think it has something to do with a genetic connection that goes back thousands of years. The blind puppy led them to a cave entrance that had been hidden from human discovery for millennia, making sounds that clearly meant, this is what they wanted you to see. Inside that cave was evidence that would rewrite the history of canine evolution and explain why some dogs are born with abilities that seem to transcend their species. But first, they had to survive what was waiting in the darkness beyond the cave entrance, because some genetic memories are protected by guardians who have been waiting thousands of years for the right person to discover them. What Axel Thompson and Dr. Chen discovered inside the ancient cave would challenge everything scientists believed about the evolution of domestic dogs and the supernatural abilities some animals seem to possess. The cave extended deep into the Montana mountainside, with walls covered in prehistoric paintings that depicted something impossible: humans, wolves, and dogs working together in coordinated hunting and rescue operations dating back over 15,000 years. These paintings predate the accepted timeline for dog domestication by thousands of years, Dr. Chen whispered, studying images that showed early humans and canines in partnership formations that looked remarkably similar to modern search and rescue operations. But it was the blind German Shepherd puppy who revealed the true purpose of this ancient site. Despite her complete lack of vision, she moved through the cave with confidence that suggested familiarity, leading them to a chamber deep underground where the walls were covered with paintings, specifically depicting blind dogs performing impossible feats of guidance, rescue, and communication. "Look at this," Axel said, examining a painting that showed a blind dog leading humans safely through a blizzard while wolves provided protection. "These aren't just random cave paintings. This is documentation of actual abilities." The alpha wolf had followed them into the cave, along with the 7 hybrid pups who moved with the same supernatural coordination that the blind puppy had been demonstrating. Together, they formed a circle around a central area where the cave paintings seemed to focus. And in the center of that circle, preserved by the dry cave atmosphere for millennia, were the mummified remains of dozens of dogs, all showing the same clouded eye condition that indicated blindness from birth. "Dr. Chen," Axel said, understanding flooding over him, "I think we're looking at evidence that blindness in certain bloodlines isn't a disability. It's an evolutionary advantage that enhances other senses to supernatural levels." The blind puppy moved among the ancient remains, making soft sounds that the hybrid pups and wolves responded to with what appeared to be reverence. She was somehow connected to this place, to these ancient blind dogs, and to abilities that had been preserved in genetic memory for thousands of years. But it was what they found next that explained why the wolf pack had risked approaching human civilization to protect this one blind puppy. Carved into the cave walls were symbols that looked like primitive writing, accompanied by paintings that told a story spanning millennia. Blind dogs serving as bridges between the human and wolf worlds, possessing abilities that allowed communication across species lines and supernatural navigation that saved lives during disasters, wars, and natural catastrophes. "She's not just a blind puppy," Axel realized. "She's the latest in a bloodline that goes back to the beginning of human-canine partnership, and the wolves have been protecting this genetic line for thousands of years." The alpha wolf approached the blind puppy and began making complex vocalizations that she translated into movements and sounds that Axel found himself understanding at an instinctive level. The message was clear. This puppy was the last of an ancient bloodline that possessed abilities crucial for the survival of both human and canine species. The wolf pack had been guarding this genetic heritage, waiting for the right human to discover it and help preserve it. But there was more. Dr. Chen had been studying the cave paintings with growing amazement. "Axel, look at these images. They show blind dogs predicting natural disasters, guiding people to safety during earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions. These aren't just rescue dogs, they're early warning systems." The blind puppy moved to a section of the cave wall covered with paintings that showed blind dogs working alongside both humans and wolves during what appeared to be massive catastrophes: floods, forest fires, ice ages, volcanic eruptions. "She's showing us something specific," Axel said, following the puppy's guidance to paintings that depicted recent disasters. "These aren't ancient events. These show modern disasters that haven't happened yet." The paintings were eerily specific. A massive earthquake in a city that looked remarkably like San Francisco. Forest fires that consumed areas matching current Montana geography, and floods that seemed to show exactly the river systems and population centers that would be affected. "Dr. Chen," Axel said, studying the prophetic images, "I think these blind dogs don't just navigate by enhanced senses. I think they can somehow perceive future events." The alpha wolf made sounds that the blind puppy translated into urgent movements toward the cave entrance. Outside, the rest of the wolf pack was showing agitation that suggested immediate danger approaching. But the danger wasn't from natural predators or environmental hazards. Through the supernatural senses that had guided them safely through the wilderness, the blind puppy detected something that made her vocalize in patterns that clearly meant humans coming, Danger. Hide. Now. Axel checked his tactical watch, 4:17 a.m. They had been in the cave for over an hour, but someone had been tracking their movement through the Montana wilderness during the darkest hours of the night. Dr. Chen, someone followed us here, and based on how agitated the wolves are becoming, whoever's coming has weapons and hostile intentions. The sound of helicopter rotors echoing through the valley confirmed Axel's worst fears. This wasn't a rescue operation. This was a capture mission designed to seize the blind puppy and eliminate any witnesses to her abilities. Through the cave entrance, they could see searchlights cutting through the darkness as military-style helicopters landed in the ancient valley that had been protected from human discovery for millennia. Base Command, this is Retrieval Team Alpha, came a radio transmission that was clearly audible even from inside the cave. We have confirmed location of the target animal, initiating capture protocol. All witnesses are to be eliminated as classified. The blind puppy made sounds that the alpha wolf immediately understood, and within seconds, 20 wolves plus 7 hybrid pups had positioned themselves in defensive formation around the cave entrance. But the most extraordinary moment came when the blind puppy approached Axel and made a series of complex vocalizations that he somehow understood perfectly. She was asking him to make a choice. Allow her to be captured and possibly save Dr. Chen's life, or fight alongside the wolf pack to protect abilities that could save thousands of future lives. The helicopter searchlights were getting closer. Automatic weapons could be heard being prepared for combat, and the ancient valley that had preserved genetic secrets for 15,000 years was about to become a battlefield. Dr. Chen, Axel said, looking at the blind puppy whose supernatural abilities represented the future of disaster prediction and life-saving capabilities. I think we're about to discover whether modern military technology can defeat 15,000 years of evolved survival instincts. The blind puppy made one final vocalization that the entire wolf pack responded to with coordinated howls that echoed through the valley like a war cry. The battle for the ancient bloodline was about to begin, and the outcome would determine whether supernatural abilities that had protected humans for millennia would survive into the modern world or be captured and weaponized by forces that understood power but not partnership. What happened in that ancient Montana valley over the next 43 minutes would be classified by 3 different government agencies, but the truth would eventually emerge through the testimony of Dr. Rebecca Chen and the miraculous abilities of a blind German shepherd puppy whose supernatural gifts would revolutionize disaster prediction forever. The military retrieval team that descended into the valley expected to capture 1 disabled animal and eliminate 2 civilian witnesses. Instead, they encountered a coordinated defense operation that combined 15,000 years of genetic memory with modern tactical awareness. Retrieval Team Alpha, we have visual on the target animal and 2 civilian witnesses, came the radio transmission from the lead helicopter. Initiating capture protocol with authorization for lethal force on human targets. But the moment the first soldier rappelled toward the cave entrance, 20 wolves emerged from positions around the valley in a coordinated assault pattern that had been refined over millennia of pack hunting. The blind German shepherd puppy, still carried protectively by Axel, began making vocalizations that seemed to coordinate the wolves' movements with supernatural precision. Despite her complete lack of vision, she was somehow directing a military-style operation using abilities that no domesticated animal should possess. Base Command, this is Retrieval Team Alpha, came the increasingly confused radio calls. The wolves are operating in coordinated tactical formation. This is not normal animal behavior. We need immediate backup. But it was what the blind puppy did next that transformed the situation from a military capture operation into something that would be remembered as the moment when ancient genetic memory proved stronger than modern technology. Using vocalizations that the alpha wolf immediately understood, the puppy began coordinating something unprecedented, a combined wolf pack and weather prediction that used her supernatural senses to call down the very forces of nature. Dr. Chen, Axel said, watching the blind puppy's behavior with growing amazement, I think she's not just predicting future disasters. I think she can influence immediate environmental conditions. The puppy's vocalizations became more complex, reaching frequencies that seemed to resonate through the valley itself. And in response, the Montana mountains began to demonstrate why some genetic abilities had been preserved across 15,000 years. Fog rolled in from the surrounding peaks with supernatural speed, reducing visibility to zero and grounding the military helicopters. Wind patterns shifted in ways that meteorologists would later describe as impossible, creating downdrafts that made flight operations deadly. And then, most remarkably, the blind puppy began making sounds that were answered not just by the local wolf pack, but by wildlife throughout the entire mountain region. "My God," Dr. Chen whispered, watching through the fog as hundreds of animals, bears, mountain lions, elk, eagles, began moving toward the valley in response to the puppy's calls. "She's summoning the entire ecosystem." The military retrieval team found themselves surrounded not just by 20 wolves, but by a coordinated defense force that included every apex predator and large animal species within a 50-mile radius. "Base command, we are aborting mission," came the final radio transmission. "We are facing organized resistance from wildlife that defies tactical assessment, requesting immediate extraction." But the most extraordinary moment came as the military forces retreated and dawn began breaking over the ancient valley. The blind German shepherd puppy made one final series of vocalizations that were answered by what sounded like every canine voice in Montana. Not just wolves, but domestic dogs from ranches and towns hundreds of miles away, all responding to a call that seemed to awaken genetic memories that had been dormant for generations. "Axel," Dr. Chen said, studying the puppy whose abilities had just demonstrated the power to coordinate wildlife across an entire state, "I think we've witnessed the awakening of abilities that could revolutionize how we predict and respond to natural disasters." 6 months later, the blind German shepherd puppy, now named Seer by Axel Thompson, had become the foundation for a new kind of disaster prediction program that combined traditional meteorology with genetic abilities that science was only beginning to understand. Working with the Midnight Brotherhood at Axel's expanded Montana facility, Seer had accurately predicted 17 natural disasters, saving thousands of lives through early warning systems that exceeded traditional forecasting by weeks or months. Her abilities had not only survived the attempt to capture them, they had evolved through her partnership with Scout, Ranger, Angel, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo into capabilities that surpassed even the ancient cave paintings. The remarkable thing about Seer, Dr. Chen explained to the congressional committee investigating the incident, is that her blindness doesn't limit her abilities, it enhances them. Without visual input, her other senses operate at levels that allow her to perceive environmental changes that predict earthquakes, storms, floods, and other disasters weeks before they occur. But it was Emma who provided the most important perspective on what Seer had brought to their family. "You know what I learned from watching Seer work with the Brotherhood?" Emma asked Axel during one of their evening conversations while listening to the harmonized sounds that now included Seer's unique vocalizations. "What's that, sweetheart?" "I learned that sometimes the people who seem most disabled are actually the ones with the most important gifts. Seer can't see with her eyes, but she can see things that sighted animals miss completely. She taught me that being different isn't being broken, it's being special in ways that other people need." The evening harmony that filled Axel's cabin now included 9 voices, but Seer's contribution was unlike any of the others. Her sounds seemed to connect not just with her immediate family, but with the broader network of canines and wildlife throughout Montana that continued to respond to her calls. "Sarah," Axel said to Officer Mitchell during one of the family gatherings, "what do you think the wolves were really protecting in that valley?" "I think they were protecting hope," Sarah replied, watching Seer guide a training exercise that demonstrated disaster prediction capabilities no technology could match. They were protecting the proof that some abilities are too important to lose, some genetic memories are too valuable to forget, and some partnerships between species are too powerful to break. Seer approached Axel with the same confident navigation she'd shown in the cave, her clouded eyes reflecting trust that transcended physical sight. In her presence, the other 8 dogs showed a calm focus that suggested they were all learning abilities that enhanced their traditional search and rescue work. "Seer," Axel said, gently stroking her head, "you taught us that blindness isn't about what you can't see. It's about perceiving everything that sighted people miss." 9 voices continued their evening song, filling the Montana cabin with harmonies that seemed to connect directly with the wilderness beyond, where wolves still howled in response to calls from a blind dog whose abilities bridged the gap between ancient genetic memory and modern life-saving technology. Because sometimes the most important discoveries aren't made by those who can see everything. Sometimes they're made by those who see beyond sight itself, into the genetic memories that connect all life and the supernatural abilities that survive across millennia to protect and preserve what matters most. And sometimes the most powerful howl isn't a call for help. Sometimes it's a call that awakens abilities that have been sleeping for thousands of years, waiting for the right moment to remind the world that some bonds between species are stronger than time, technology, or human interference. For Seer, who taught us that blindness can be a superpower when it enhances abilities that save lives. For the Montana wolf pack that protected 15,000 years of genetic memory until the right human arrived to honor it. For every animal whose disabilities are actually superpowers waiting to be discovered and celebrated. For the ancient cave that preserved proof that supernatural abilities are real, important, and worth protecting across millennia. Welcome to a world where genetic memory guides the present, where blindness reveals truths that sight cannot perceive, and where the oldest partnerships between species continue to evolve in ways that save lives and change the world. One blind puppy whose supernatural senses awakened an ancient alliance. One midnight howl that connected genetic memories across 15,000 years. 9 voices singing the song of families that transcend species, sight, and time itself. Sometimes the most important guidance comes from those who navigate by abilities that eyes cannot see. We want to hear what you felt while listening to this story. Don't forget to comment and rate the story out of 10.